Awesome.
Thank you.
Yeah, sweet.
You just have to like give me permission, I guess, or something.
Give me one sec.
It's funny. It says, please ask the host for permission to record, but it doesn't ask for you. It just like makes you,
Just one sec.
you
I
can
did
make me a
this.
co-host or something. That's how
Yeah,
I usually do it. Or you could say allow record.
I did this before recording. I've got screen sharing. Record a separate audio file. Optimize third party. Record video during screen sharing. Alex, if you're listening, you wouldn't happen to know, would you, where the option is?
You are the host. Normally, if I'm the host, I just pop up to the. If you hover over Ondi, the three little dots on the button.
Yep.
Did that do it?
Yes. So make. Oh yeah, there you go. Allow to record local files. Does that work?
Yeah, that should do it.
That work? Nope, she's muted herself.
Here, hey, Ondi, I think he just gave you permission. Are you able to record?
Let me try. Yep, I've got it.
Awesome.
Great.
Sweet.
I've got it.
Fantastic.
Okay, so I'm ready to start whenever you're ready to go.
Yeah.
So this is your podcast, yeah?
Yeah, so this is our podcast called Midnight Double Feature. Basically, we talk. We're fans of movies. I was just telling Alex just off air. I personally love like the behind the scenes aspects of movies. I mean, talking to directors and writers and cinematographers and people who don't get the spotlight as much as they should, because I just love. I love hearing about the craft of like how these movies are made. And I've definitely got a few questions about Mapplethorpe. So I'm really excited to get into it. But
I'm happy to answer anything. Yeah.
Thank you so much, by the way, Ondi, for coming onto the podcast. This is absolutely a huge honor for us. So this is absolutely amazing. And congratulations on the release of the director's cut of Mapplethorpe. Let me just kick off by asking how you're personally feeling about having the definitive cut of your movie out there after 3 years of the release of the theatrical version. This is like we're living in a time when people are calling for director's cuts of movies. So, I just kind of want to see how you're feeling now that, your version is out there.
I appreciate it. It's a miracle. It's like absolutely a miracle that my cut has seen the light of day. And it really comes from the tenacity of a few women who really one woman, Jamie Wolf, who saw my film, saw the director's cut, then saw what was done to it, and then thought it was a travesty. She just really thought that, I think as much for the legacy of Robert Mapplethorpe as much as for me as an artist and my vision being out there. I think the combination, as well as the irony of a story about Robert Mapplethorpe being censored, all of that I think contributed to Jamie Wolf's, ultimate just never say die attitude about getting this cut released. And she just didn't stop until she managed to pull it off. So she and Geraldine Dreyfus, who's an incredible, just fairy godmother of mostly documentaries, but also scripted films, just important work in the world. She spirits a lot of it into the world, and lucky enough to call her an ally. And together they were relentless and they made it happen. I mean, I gave up. I didn't think it was going to happen. And then the odd thing was, when it first happened that I finished the cut, it was accepted into Sundance. We were so excited. And then for reasons that I don't want to get into, it was taken out of Sundance before it premiered, and it was re-edited. I had a health scare that turned out to be like a false positive that really helped me to put it all in perspective. Even though this is something I had produced for 12 years and had worked on 58 drafts of the screenplay, and then shot the entire thing in 19 days with this incredible team in New York, and set of actors that were just just mind-blowing. Everybody, what they brought to it, pulling off a period piece over 4 decades, 50s, 60s, 70s, and 80s in New York in 19 days in like 35 different real locations was quite a feat. And, you know, we did all that. And then to have it not premiere at Sundance when it was invited to, it was heartbreaking. But having the health scare really just made me go, you know, it's just a movie. Like, please let me live, let me see my son grow up. It's just a movie. And that really helped me get through the next few months until Tribeca, and then stand behind the film, even though I was disappointed by the cut, and support it and never say a word about it. And you know, and it's a wonderful film. Even the official release is a wonderful film. It's just not the complete vision, and it's not the complete story either of Robert Mapplethorpe. And the Catholic Church, which was largely cut out of that version, is vital to understanding who he is, why he made the work he made, why he did the things he did, what his relationship with his father was like. I mean, it's just impossible. And I remember sitting there with a journalist asking me, hey, why didn't you include the church in your film? You know, and I didn't want to disparage anybody or anything to do with that release or hurt the release in any way. So I just, you know, sloughed off the question or diverted it somehow, but I couldn't answer it honestly, which was that I totally had the church in the film. And so to see the boy back in the film and the church back in the film, and the priest set up at the beginning and then paying off at the end, and the death in its fullness and full-bodied experience of, you know, you see the work that you made, I think, as an artist when you die, but you also see the people that you loved, you know, and then for him to return to his young self. I mean, I edited that myself, and it was one of the most beautiful edits that I feel like I was channeling, you know, and it was cut down in the official release. And it was heartbreaking, but it's wonderful, even though it's late, you know, it's late in the game. And I, you know, it's after quite a few negative reviews for exactly what was cut out of it, of the official release, that I had to just kind of bear with, as I'm somebody who's used to a lot of positive reviews of my work. So I just had to kind of bear with that. And it was humbling, and it was a learning experience, all of it, on being graceful and just dealing with it, you know. And now the irony of this moment is that as the director's cut is going to come out, it was originally scheduled to come out on the 9th of March. My father suddenly was passing away, starting in January. And he actually chose to die, and he was scheduled to die on March 3rd. And in California, we have an end of life option act. And he was a phenomenal man and an incredible father. And I dedicated all of February and early March to making sure that his departure was as good as it could be, and that he understood how much he was loved. And he said goodbye to all of his friends, and I documented everything. So again, even like this director's cut coming out should be the greatest thing that ever happened to me, you know, but it was exactly opposite. I had to push it in order to be there for my father and to be there for myself in the wake of losing my father. So we pushed, you know, luckily pushed the release till the 2nd of April. But again, real life, you know, huge, massive moment of just losing the patriarch of my family happened opposite the release of the director's cut. So again, it's in perspective. It's like, okay, well, it's wonderful, but it's just a movie. So, yeah.
Well, I mean,
it's a long answer. I apologize for my
no,
long.
look, the longer the better. I love it. Well, look, my sincere condolences for your father, and you know, it is, man, to have two giant life altering things happen to you at both both releases of the movie. That's insane. And you know, it must take a lot for you to it must have taken a lot for you to not be bitter about that first release, and be, you know, try and like internalize it and just be like, look, I have to stand by this cut, because this is the movie that I made in some shape or form, but not really. So you know, it must have taken a lot. So props to you for really, you know, standing your ground. I really admire and respect that for sure.
Yeah, there's a lot of interesting parallels there, and it's a great learning experience, it's just important as an artist, especially if you're making films about people that are real, to kind of really be aware of all of the circumstances in life and how they kind of play together, and that's really what attracted me to filmmaking in the first place was, could I recreate the serendipity of life somehow? Could I connect the dots of this incredible journey that we all take, this unique journey that we all take that has so many parallels. We go through so many things that make this the human condition that we have on, no matter our circumstances. And we've all experienced that during COVID now, this past year. And yeah, it's always important to me to kind of balance my work with trying as best I can to be present in my life. And I'm someone who's dedicated to my work. I'm like cutting my films, I edit my films, I shoot my films. I even shot all the Super 8 in Mapplethorpe. I kept a camera on my director's chair, and I knew that in 19 days we couldn't shoot the entire script. So I would shoot it on the way to work. I would shoot it on the way to set. I'd shoot the Brooklyn Bridge, right? A lot of that footage that you see, of just kind of life in New York at that time, I was filming just in between stuff, or Matt like lying in the bed as Nancy Schreiber, our fantastic DP, was relighting. I would just like film him with money on his chest, or take Marianne and take Patty and Sandy outside and have them do that dance, just have fun with the actors so that we had some peanut butter for the bread is the way I put
that's
it.
Awesome. That's such a cool way to do things. That's awesome. I wanted to ask you about the actual genre itself, because you've primarily directed documentaries about musicians like Russell Brand and the Dandy Warhol. So I'm curious to know what like steered you towards covering the life of a different kind of artist, but also choosing it to do it as more of a drama instead of a documentary. Because it certainly feels documentary like, but like you said, uh you also focused on being incredibly reflective as well. So is that something that you wanted to achieve via a drama, and you thought was more effective via a drama than a documentary as well?
Well, first off, he's dead. So I felt like I wanted to bring him alive in order to make an anthem for artists. I wanted to really have you feel the tension that he felt as he was coming of age and coming into his art. And really the camera became this almost tiger's tail that he grabbed a hold of, and it led him into these worlds he could never have otherwise entered. It mediated the experience and made it safe for him to go into these clubs. He wasn't yet in touch with the fact, he wasn't yet allowing himself to admit he was gay, because being gay when you're a Catholic boy in that era was really not good. He wouldn't be right with God anymore, and he certainly wouldn't be right with his father. And he was an altar boy. I mean, he had all the respect for the church, but he also loved the iconography and loved the sexuality inherent in all of that imagery around Jesus and the blood and the cross and the rib cages and the flowing robes. I mean, he loved that stuff. He used it, and it informs all his work, but before he could even be gay, he was in those gay clubs with a camera in his hand. And I relate to that as a documentary filmmaker. You mentioned Dig, you mentioned my movie Dig, whether it's Dig or We Live in Public in a bunker in Manhattan with 150 people living under constant surveillance, or it's, Brand, A Second Coming with Russell Brand, and suddenly in the comedy world, or it's even in my movie Cool It, the camera allowed me into climate change labs and into places I never would have gone, and asking questions I never would have asked, and I feel like that's really what the camera did for Robert early on. So I related on that level. But I wanted to make a scripted film because I really felt like if people could see a person like this, he's very similar to a lot of my subjects in that I call them impossible visionaries. They're people that kind of take on the impossible. They see something we can't see, and then they have to kind of withstand the doubt and ridicule of many people that don't understand.
Always
what they're
pushing
doing.
uphill.
Always pushing uphill. But as much as you might have issues with things that they do or things that they say or how they act, you can't help but respect them, you know? And hopefully you actually start to kind of lean in to the gray area and wrestle with yourself about your own flaws. And are they really limitations, or could you do the thing that you dreamt to do, you know? And that's what I hope happens when people see my movies. And that's what I hoped would happen with Mapplethorpe, because he was a cultural lightning rod. He was easily one of the most controversial artists in the history of America and maybe the world. And that's because he was doing something that no one was doing. And he insisted on doing it because he saw beauty in those worlds. And he wanted us to see that beauty too. And he was not going to stop until we did. So he took those subjects that were documentary subjects at the time, where he's taking pictures of this underworld. And you see that in the movie, in that scene, which we shot in basically 5 minutes, by the way, with a steady cam. I shot the steady cam without Matt, and then Matt Smith, the incredible force that is Robert.
We'll talk about Matt Smith in a sec.
Yeah, came into the scene because he had literally 2 minutes or something. And in one take, he just did that walk around that scene. I did a scene that was his point of view. I did a shot that was his point of view, and then one with him in it. Boom, that was it. But in that scene, you see that he's like fascinated in this cornucopia of just like sex, and you cannot hear that.
It's fine.
Like
it's fine.
Okay. But anyway, you see all of that, and then you see him walking home, and at least in the director's cut, you see that he envisions the GIMP, the man in all rubber, in a pure white frame. And that's really my attempt to say to the audience, to portray a crucial moment in his artistic development, which is, wait, if I take the riffraff out of the scene and I turn it into form, pure form and sculpture, and I show just how beautiful and alien the sculpture is of this man on this bench, and I put him in a studio, it'll be like a Rodin. It'll be like a Michelangelo. It'll be undeniably art. And therefore, people will collect it. And it'll end up in museums. And that's what his goal was. And he did it. He did it by doing that. And I think that's a really important transition that he makes from more of a documentary photographer to a studio photographer. That made a big difference. That's one of the ways I relate to him, but there's several. I hope it answers your question.
No, it absolutely does. And your film was incredibly effective in showing that. Absolutely, 100%. You mentioned your cinematographer, Nancy Schreiber. And
He's wonderful.
Oh, well, yeah. Well, this is kind of what I want to talk about, because, you chose to shoot this entire movie, well, most of it in Super 16.
All of it on film.
Yeah, all of it on film, right? Because you can just see that grain like swimming, and it's beautiful. And we're seeing, digital becoming the increasingly more common and cheaper alternative. And I just kind of wanted to comment on that, but I also ask you, what was your reasoning behind the decision? Is it to somewhat emulate the style of Mapplethorpe, but also give it that documentary-like feel? Like, I don't know. I kind of wanted to get your sort of like mindset behind your and Nancy's mindset behind that.
So the challenge, one of the many challenges of making a movie about Robert Mapplethorpe, is how do you make it as beautiful on a low budget as his photography? And I'm not saying that the film is as beautiful as photography, but it's very beautiful. It's pretty beautiful. And the way that we did that, one of the main, elements is shooting on film. I mean, the film has, like you said, this texture to it. Even the Super 16, I wouldn't even want to shoot on 35 millimeter. The Super 16, it's like a painting. It's literally like a painting come alive. You can see it all as if it's painted. And the color, the color range and what I could do. And again, the director's cut, I got to color myself, whereas the official version, I did not color. And the difference is quite drastic, I think, between the two. The colors in this director's cut are just like, oh my gosh, beautiful. And I don't think we would ever have gotten that from an Alexa. And that's thanks to Steve Bellamy and Kodak, who really got behind the film. Vanessa Bendetti, the team at Kodak in general, they're really, Ann Hubble, like I'm starting to name them all.
No, please.
I want to name them all.
Give them all the credit.
Yeah, they work to make it possible, and they do this for a lot of filmmakers, for us to accomplish shooting on film. And it would not have, the film wouldn't have, I don't think, succeeded if we didn't shoot it on film. The other thing that we did that almost drove Nancy crazy, because we had all these lofts with windows all around, you know, and we had to somehow accomplish my vision of shooting everything side lit, so that the contrast in Mapplethorpe's work would be mirrored in the movie. And so that everything would be side lit or backlit, silhouetted or side lit, nothing full frontal light like you see me right now. That would be unacceptable to me. And how do you do that when you have windows on all sides and you're shooting on a very limited schedule? And Nancy pulled it off. Sometimes she was a little bit upset with me, but she pulled it off.
That makes absolute sense, honestly, the theory behind it. Yeah.
That's what we did. And then the color that we did, you know, specifically the palettes were different per decade. So there was a warmth in the 70s, you know, and it's cold in the 80s. And that also helped to tell the story, I think.
It's gorgeous. You guys absolutely did a phenomenal job with the visuals. Like it looks beautiful. Especially, you know, because you don't see a lot of the time these days when you watch a movie, just the grain swimming. I love seeing like just the word that I always use is swimming, like, because that's what it's doing. It's just yeah, exactly.
It's doing that, especially on the Super 8. The Super 8 is the most, you know, is the grainiest and has the most sort of, I call it perfectly imperfect, you know, and I do that on purpose. I'll open the back of the camera, pop the film out so that it has a flash of light and color, and then comes back to being, you know, it's magic, as Mapplethorpe would say, you know. But yeah.
Let's talk about the amazing Matt Smith. When you came across Matt, how did you know that he had the right balance of troubled yet inspired to play Mapplethorpe? You know, like this is
the story of Matt coming into this project is a funny one.
Hit me.
My son was 9 years old, and he was watching Doctor Who a lot. And he said, "Mama, you should marry Matt Smith." And I was like, Juki, I don't think that's going to work out. There's a little bit of an age difference between us. And also he's geographically undesirable. I think he's in London. A couple of days later, he came in, Mama. I said, yeah. He said, you should cast Matt Smith for Robert Mapplethorpe. Matt Smith should play Robert Mapplethorpe. And I thought, no, but okay. Like, I'll just say yes, because I just want to appease him, and how cute is my son, you know? And I forgot about it because, like, you know, Matt Smith's character in Doctor Who didn't speak anything to playing Robert Mapplethorpe whatsoever. Robert Mapplethorpe was a dark prince. He was a mercurial cauldron where everything was right below the surface. He was never quite satisfied. He was a perfectionist, and he was funny, but it was a very dry humor. And I didn't see that in Matt's character. I didn't look deeply into it, but I also, you know, understandably didn't take my 9-year-old too seriously. Then the phone rang like a week and a half later, and it was Matt's agents about, you know, have you thought about Matt Smith for the part of Robert Mapplethorpe? And I said, well, funny you should mention it, but my son brought it up. And okay, sure, I'll have lunch with him. So I walk into the restaurant, and my son was actually homesick from school that day, so I brought him along because it's rare that my extremely demanding career can provide such a perk as him meeting his hero. Brought Juki to lunch, you know, thought at least there'll be that to have out of it. And I meet a man who is absolutely embodies Mapplethorpe. I mean, he was just sitting there in the restaurant, drawing on the table. It was granted a paper on top of a tablecloth. So, but he's drawing with a pencil and pen, and, you know, and his hair's on, and he's in like a plain white t-shirt, and he's a little bit nervous, and he's a little bit, you know, breaking the coffee stirrer up into like 15 pieces on the table and leaving it in like a little mountain, you know. And I thought I could really see him as Robert Mapplethorpe. This is way before The Crown. So it wasn't even necessarily, he wasn't necessarily even financeable as the lead of the movie, but to their credit, the whole producing team was on board with him reading. And then his reading was absolutely jaw-dropping. And I mean, of course, he probably wouldn't even read today, but when he read, we understood that he had the gravitas and also the tension, he was like bubbling, and we could feel it, from that reading. And that was it. We went with him, and then lucky for us, The Crown happened, and he became very financeable as a lead of a film. And then we had to wait for The Crown to shoot the movie. And then he had to lose 20 pounds after playing Prince Philip, for which he had to gain 20 pounds. Wow. So he showed up very thin and in not a very good mood because of that. And so I shot the movie in reverse. So we shot the death first. We shot the death on day 6. We shot him struggling with AIDS in the first 3 days of shooting. Right off the bat, some of the most painful scenes. We shot all of those scenes in the 80s loft, all of them in 3 days. And it was harrowing, absolutely harrowing. But I couldn't wait to get to where he's younger in the story and able to eat more. And then I would go to this bakery called Levain Bakery, and we'd pick him up some chocolate chip cookies. And so those cookies he's eating on the steps with Patty are actually his favorite cookies. I mean,
nice.
Yeah, I got them for him on rehearsal day, and he couldn't have much because he was still trying to be super skinny, which he is anyway. But he was really quite emaciated for the first week, and then he got in a better mood as we ate more.
He's absolutely fantastic, and I can't imagine anyone else playing Robert Mapplethorpe now that I've seen him in the role.
No, I mean, he's incredible. The whole cast is amazing.
Totally.
Because we were low budget and we were in New York, we had to cast locally, people who could live as locals, and also we wanted to hit the minority threshold as well to make the movie feasible.
Yeah.
And so, thanks to Judy Henderson, our amazing casting director, I saw an incredible slew of theater actors, and some of them just brought incredible performances, like Caroline McCormick, who played Joan Mapplethorpe, and oh God, there's just so many. I could go on and on. But
no, the casting in the film is fantastic. Like you knocked it out of the park. We're nearing towards the end here. I do have one question. Moving away from Mapplethorpe, but I mean, it's not every day we get to talk to the winner of an award at Sundance, right? I mean, so I have to talk about Dig, the documentary you made back in 2003, and of course, you took home the documentary grand jury prize. So I was just wondering if you could tell me about your Sundance experience. How was that?
Oh, it's great that you asked that question, because Sundance has been very influential in my life, in my career. And I didn't really even know what it was. I didn't even pay attention to that stuff when I was shooting Dig. I was just shooting, from when I was 23 to 30, a story that I couldn't believe, that if I'd written it, you wouldn't believe it. And it started out with 10 bands on the verge of getting signed to look at the collision of art and commerce. And it progressed into this star-crossed love story, rivalry, madness, friendship mix of just unbelievable dialogue and characters between the Brian Jonestown Massacre and the Dandy Warhols. And I had, as I told you, this idea as a young filmmaker that if I could shoot life as it was unfolding, then I could recreate the serendipity by connecting the dots of the most important moments, and then I could actually, make a film that was greater than anything I could write. This is before I was making scripted films, and I wanted to revolutionize documentaries in that way. I really wanted it to be as unfolding drama, and so I filmed everything with my brother David, and we filmed everything. And then I had this pile of footage, and suddenly I'm charged with editing 2,500 hours of footage, and I didn't calculate that part. Couldn't hire anybody to edit it because there was too much footage. Nobody could find their way around it. Plus I didn't have any money, And so anyway, long story short, I end up 4 years of editing. So I may as well keep up with the story. So then I'm keeping up with the story, which adds more footage, but not as much footage. And that's why you have this saga called Dig. And I don't think there's any mistake as to why it won Sundance. It's because, you know, it's actually really truly shot over that long of time. And I think time provides the greatest narrative. It's as much of me just staying on the horse and having tenacity as anything else, you know? And then somehow piecing that movie together. At one point there was a 5-hour cut and I was like, I can't cut anything more from this, but I became pregnant with my son, Juki, the same one who cast Matt Smith.
Nice.
And when I won the award, he was 11 weeks old. It was his first trip was to Sundance. He was born the same week I finished Dig. And the only reason I finished Dig was because I was becoming a mother. And I was like, I can't edit Anton Newcomb and the wild rock and roll life I've been living for my 20s and also become a mother. Like the two things just can't happen together. So I finished Dig, at least a cut, looked down, couldn't see my feet, put it in the mail. And as I'm recovering from giving birth and I'm back at home, the phone's ringing off the hook. And it's Sundance saying, hey, we'd like to have your movie premiere in competition. So I became a mother and kind of hit the international press at the same time. And it became a phenomenon. I mean, even before it won Sundance, people were pulling us off the sidewalk if we had a placard on that said Dig. It just became this, you know, this thing. It was a worldwide sensation. And it was really my life on film. I mean, it was like, you know, but simultaneously I'd been filming We Live in Public. And so I made a movie about mind control in between, which is like my jazz record called Join Us, because Bush won the election, even though there was no reason for him to win. It was like we were in a war predicated on a lie, our economy was in the dumps. So I thought there was mind control in America. So I made a movie about cults called Join Us in 2007. But meanwhile, the whole time since 1999, I was filming Josh Harris and his vision of the internet for a movie called We Live in Public, which I couldn't finish until we had the iPhone, because no one would understand what happened in that bunker in Manhattan in 1999 without the internet and Facebook. So as soon as that all came forth, then I realized that the movie was this prophecy of social media and the lack of intimacy and privacy in the modern age. And I raced to finish that. And then that won Sundance. And when that won Sundance, it really solidified my career, you know, in a way that I can't, it's just incredible. You know, it just, because I think people thought off Dig, well, maybe it's just the story that she grabbed a hold of. And then when I became the first person to win Sundance twice, it was like, oh, it's her. She actually knows how to tell these stories, you know, which has then granted me a lot of opportunities, more than financial opportunities, the opportunity to document what I want. You know, when I'm interested in something, I can usually go find that person or pursue that thing. And I have this reputation, thanks to Sundance, that can't be taken away. But that's just the festival. In terms of Mapplethorpe, I have Sundance to thank for a formation of the project, really. I mean, I optioned the rights originally in 2006, got in touch with the foundation in 2009.
Oh, wow.
Because I'd won Sundance twice, they gave me the rights. Like it would, you know, they wouldn't have recognized me from Adam otherwise. So, and then because when I won for We Live in Public, I got a call from the Institute about, do I have a scripted film? I happen to have a script of a wonderful man that had been written by Bruce Goodrich, a wonderful guy, mostly a production designer. And he wrote an original script that was like a posthumous look at Mapplethorpe. And I said, well, I do have a project sort of in the background that I'm developing about Robert Mapplethorpe. And they said, we'd love to see it. And they invited me to the lab. So summer 2010, I went and I lived at Sundance over a month. My first lunch, the first day I got there, was one-on-one with Robert Redford, you know, just about Mapplethorpe. I had Ed Harris standing next to me on set. I had Leslie Linkaglatter, you know, giving me critique. I shot 4 scenes with Hollywood actors to workshop. And at the end of it, they said, congratulations, you know, you're ready to direct scripted work based upon how you've directed these scenes. But you need a new script and you have to write it and you need a star. And so that was it. I mean, and I said, what makes you think I can write it? And they said, well, the way you've made these other movies, you clearly understand this kind of character and how to tell that story. We'd like to see it applied to the script.
And this is feedback from Redford and Ed
This is
Harris and
Redford.
Leslie.
This is them in the room. I mean, talk about a good cult. Like if there's such a thing as a good cult, it was like 10 of them, 10 masters. Joan Darling, an incredible acting coach. Like I had never gone to film school. You know, I had come out of college and just gone into making films. I started making documentaries at a public access station when I was a student at Yale. Yale University had no production facilities back then. So I had no real formal training. And my training came from Sundance, and it came from the director's lab and the writer's lab. And when I got out of there, I sat down and I thought, I have to write this script. And I contacted the Mapplethorpe Foundation. They sent me a box of books and some early works book, this gold book that I then learned about him as a collage artist, which becomes part of the movie, a book that compared his work to Rodin and Michelangelo. That was absolutely vital to my understanding of who he was as an artist in the world. And you know, it was thanks to the support of Mapplethorpe Foundation and Sundance that this film got made. They even gave us a grant. I mean, yeah. So I can't say enough about it.
Wow,
really.
that's amazing. That's so fantastic. Just to see.
Yeah, they are a very important institution for truth. They're all about nurturing filmmakers and in telling their stories and telling the truth.
Oh, absolutely. You hear from directors all the time about how Sundance is, you know, one of the best gateways. I mean, you know, like my favorite story is Kevin Smith's. I mean, that everyone knows that story. So, yeah.
Yeah. What is that story? Was it to do with the festival and him being at the festival?
Yeah. So he was at the festival, but basically it's a story of clerks. So, you know, him maxing out 5 credit cards when he was younger. He just he shot the film at his old convenience store at night, not in business hours, and you know, he's just like, it was like a Hail Mary. You know, he sold his car and then he got noticed. And you know,
because of Sundance. I mean, that's the power of the Sundance Film Festival.
Exactly.
I mean, there's no better festival to premiere, which is why it was tragic that Mapplethorpe didn't have a chance to premiere there. It was like, I couldn't believe it. But I think it's just, it's not as often known that the labs are quite as formative as they are. The Sundance directing, writing, and producing labs are just like, and now they're all around the world. I mean, I encourage anyone who's watching this to look it up, because you might think, oh, well, that's in Utah, but no, they're in England, they're in India, they're all over the place now. Well, maybe with COVID, maybe not, but then they're doing it virtually. They have screenwriting labs. They just really nurture artists. Michelle Satter, I should say her name, is one of the most phenomenal, you know, forces in independent film. She founded Sundance with Robert Redford, and she runs the labs. And she's one of the most sensitive, intelligent people I've ever met. So yeah, I'm extremely grateful for that. And I too was, you know, before Dig went to Sundance, I was literally so skinny. Like my brother and I were just, you know, early Dig when we were buying tapes, because we shot on tapes back then. And the people at the tape store would be like, shouldn't you go across the street to the grocery store and get some food? Like, you're buying so many tapes here. You guys are so skinny, you know? Like we weren't starving to death, but we were definitely taking every cent and putting it into that film, which no one understood, because neither band sound scanned anything, couldn't get arrested making that film. And then I finally found an investor, and Anton scared the investor away because he was going through his, you've seen the film ostensibly.
Yeah.
He was going through his like wear white and come when I call heroin phase. And he was like threatened his life. And that was it for that.
Holy
you know,
shit.
That financier wrote me and said, you're sitting on a pot of gold. I hope you keep it up, but I can't risk my life for this. It's like, okay, great.
Wow.
Yeah, we all have our stories.
Wow. Ondi, I know we're running along. I have one final question for you.
Sure.
This is just to close it out. So after covering the lives of so many talented people, who's next on your radar? What's your next project? Well, or dream project? I mean, I see the.
I have a couple of things going on right now.
I see the artwork of Bowie there in the background. I'm curious.
Well, Bowie is a big inspiration for me, but a dear friend of mine is making a movie about him, or I would be. Yeah. But no, I'm interested in really telling stories that are a little closer to home. I mentioned that I documented the death of my father, and I think it's really important that we have the right to die. And also, my father was an impossible visionary, probably the original one in my life. He founded an airline that was the fastest growing airline in the history of the world, the year I was born. But then when I was 9, his neck was cracked in a massage and he was paralyzed and became hemiplegic. And my mother stuck with him, and their love story is quite transcendent and powerful. And what he did and who he was as a presence on this earth is worthy of the screen. And I've been working on a script about him again. You know, I didn't want to make up just a documentary of his life because I want to bring that whole era to life. You know, back when airplanes represented prosperity and everybody got dressed up to get on them, and there were marching bands, and you know, he was at the Polo Club with Prince Charles, and then bam, there's no disability, there's no rights, there's no disability act, there's no like anything. He's now paralyzed and his company's stolen from him. And you know, really a look at the American dream, and also you know, a story of real greed and betrayal. So it's called A Stroke of Genius. And that's a script that I hope to shoot next. Also a period piece, also will be shot on film. And I worked on the script with him on his deathbed. So I'm just working on that rewrite right now. And then simultaneously, I documented what I think was an extremely courageous and powerful choice he made. And so I'm making a film out of that, like a documentary, probably short, probably a longer short, called 15 Days. That's what it's called right now. So definitely I'm in the dad realm right now. I'm also working on a film about my sister, who's a very powerful rabbi. She's powerful because she's a massive social activist, political activist, very courageous, has been arrested many, many times, and also leads the largest reform congregation in Brooklyn, New York. Her name is Rachel Timoner, and the movie's called Rebel Rabbi. And it's another short, but it's almost a companion piece because she then had to come here and help my father die as his daughter and as his rabbi. So there's an intersection between those two films. So I'm not sure how it's going to play out yet, but they're definitely both pretty close to home and pretty important to me. So.
That's awesome, Ondi. I'm looking forward to both of them. That sounds fantastic. I mean, you're an absolute workhorse. You put 100% to everything you do. So, I mean, why should these two be any different? So, look, just want to say thank you so much for jumping onto Midnight Oil Feature for this interview. This has been absolutely fantastic. Mapplethorpe was a fantastic movie, and Mapplethorpe, the director's cut is even better. It's now available on VOD. So, make sure you check it out if you are listening to this, because it does document the life of someone who was truly great, and someone who was truly just transcendent. I think might be the most effective word. Well, if you had to boil it down to one word, Andy, what would you describe him?
I'd say fierce. I mean, just fierce in his dedication, and a perfectionist, and a real inspiration. Even as he made really bad decisions and really bad choices a lot of the time, and treated people sometimes in terrible ways. He did incredible things and pushed the envelope for LGBTQ people everywhere, made photography a collectible art form. And more than anything, it's really a beautiful story of a man who is trying to reconcile the beauty he sees and is able to capture in a frame with all of his relationships and all of his love that he has to give, which is not as perfect. So it's really a story about all of us. We're all going through a lot of what he's going through in this movie. So
absolutely.
I hope you enjoyed it. Yeah, that was not one. I failed that.
No, it's more than it's awesome. Thank you so much.
He's an important part of history and a cultural lightning rod. That's the word. It's 3 words.
There you go.
Cultural lightning.
Cultural. Well, lightning rod can be hyphenated. So.
Okay, good. 2 words.
No worries.
Okay.
Okay, Ondi. Thank you so much. Yeah, you nailed it. It's very
all right. So so nice to meet you.
Likewise, you have an open invitation to come on anytime. So.
Well, write me an email so next time I'm in Sydney, I'll look you up.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Ondi.
Okay.
Bye.
Ciao.
Thank you so much, Ondi.